The meeting is being recorded.
Okay, then let's begin. My name is Devin Kenyon from Santa Clara University, and I am acting as the chair today. I will call the meeting to order, and I will ask, I guess I asked Natalie to take roll because it doesn't appear like Devin McFarland is on with us yet. Is that right?
Yes, just give me a quick moment. I will be bringing one more member online as part of the roll. As I don't see him just yet, we will take the roll. Susan Bakshian, Jennifer Newcomb, Devin Kenyon,
Present.
Don Smythe,
Present.
Christopher Idedon,
Present.
Nidia Dueñez,
Present.
Donald Scotton. We have quorum, and I understand that Donald Scotton has just arrived and will be promoted shortly into the meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so as noted, I am acting as the chair today in the absence of Susan Bakshian and Jennifer Newcomb. I want to thank Donald Scotton, who I don't know if I've seen him show up yet, and myself for sort of the end of our terms. New members will be appointed to this group very shortly when the Committee of Bar Examiners sort of finalizes their chair and vice chair appointments. As someone who has spent a long time teaching on Zoom over the last year and a half, I'll just ask everyone to please keep themselves muted when not speaking and use the raise hand function. So Professor Kenyon remains kind and happy. And I have noted in my agenda, if you're on the phone, you can use *9 to raise hands. So now we will turn it over for public comment. Here, anyone who wishes may make public comment. We will be limiting public comment to 2 minutes each. Do we have any public comment?
Yes, I see one public commenter. I will be unmuting the commenter now. Ms. Hirsch, the line should be open for you to make your comment.
Oh, it's not a comment. I just wanted to say that I'm here. I'm having a little problem with the connection, so there's no video, but I'm representing People's College of Law in my capacity as registrar and administrator. Normally it would have been Dean Spiro, but he stepped back from his position, and now we have a new dean. His name is Juan Sariñana. He was unable to be here today, but I am.
Thank you, Ms. Hirsch.
Yes, thank you. And I think the staff will note your presence and make sure that they have the updated information for your law school. Is there any other public comment?
No other public comment.
Okay, seeing none, we will close public comment. We're moving right along. Now it is time to sort of approve the minutes. The minutes were posted online. Did anybody have any changes or edits to the minutes that were posted and distributed? Okay, seeing none, I will call for a motion and a second to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. And I will ask for a roll call vote, please.
Yes, and because we are in a remote format, we will do a roll call each time. Susan Bakshian, Jennifer Newcomb, Don Smythe.
Approved.
Christopher Idedon.
Approved.
Nidia Dueñez.
Approved.
Donald Scotton.
Approved.
Chair Devin Kenyon.
Approved.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Great, thank you. Okay, so now we move on to various staff reports. The first staff report is an update on the Blue Ribbon Commission on the future of the bar exam, and I believe Amy Nunez is giving us that report.
Yes, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I'm Amy Nunez, Director of the Office of Admissions. I'll be sharing a PowerPoint with you today to provide an update on the work of the Blue Ribbon Commission. Give me 1 second while I set this up. All right, can you see my presentation?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. So just as a background, in partnership with the California Supreme Court, the State Bar Board of Trustees established the Blue Ribbon Commission on the future of the bar exam. Just as a background as to, can you see, are you seeing the second slide on the Blue Ribbon Commission composition? So that Blue Ribbon Commission consists of 16 members that have been appointed by the California Supreme Court, and they represent key institutional entities, different attorney practice sectors and settings, and they also reflect the state's demographic and geographic diversity. So the list here shows the different entities that are represented. So members from the CAPA Working Group, the CBE, the National Conference of Bar Examiners Testing Task Force, the Council on Fairness, Access and Fairness, the California Lawyers Association, law school deans, judges, members from the California Department of Consumer Affairs, from our current State Bar Board of Trustees, as well as a national expert on examination development and grading. Now, as for what this group is charged with, the commission has been asked to consider the work that went into the 2020 job analysis. This is the California Practice Analysis Working Group that came together, worked on a set of analysis with a report and recommendations. So the idea is to confer on that product to inform themselves based on that information for recommendations in the future. This group will be looking at the work that was conducted in 2020. The National Conference of Bar Examiners also embarked on a job analysis on a national level. So they'll be looking at the recommendations from that report. And to assess whether there's a sufficient alignment between the California and the national job analysis, and to determine whether the adoption of the uniform bar examination is appropriate. And if so, to develop, and if it were, to determine whether a California component should be considered as part of the UBE. As well, and if not, if the UBE is not an option that this group believes is an examination option for California, that we develop our own examination and what that examination content would consist of. Also, if an examination is not the appropriate measure of minimum competence for entry-level attorneys, to investigate alternative methods for licensing. Also, we're looking at all our different options on the table. So this would include things like an open book test, and also, continuing with an online exam. The other thing, sorry, let me get into this. And where we're at right now. So the meeting, the group has met one time, and we met on July 6th. And at that meeting, the goal of the first meeting was really to provide a background and all of the foundational work that we have related to the bar exam. So some of the topics that were explored at that meeting were what the bar examination is composed of currently, and how did it get to this point. So looking at things like the cut score and the different exam formats that exist with the California bar exam. Also exploring and explaining the relationship between the multi-state bar examination and the California bar exam. We also explored the work of the National Conference of Bar Examiners Testing Task Force. So a member, the chair of the testing task force came and presented at that. And we are on parallel tracks in terms of assessing what our current exam, using the data from the practice analysis to look at the future of our examinations. And where we're at now, we have our next meeting that's scheduled on September 1st. And this initiative is scheduled to take 18 months. So I imagine that we'll have a report in January 2023, contingent on us being able to meet consistently in the next 18 months. Also, our webcast is available on the State Bar website. So if anybody wanted to review it or at a later time or at any point, we are Bagley-Keene compliant. So that webcast will be available on our website, and it's open to the public. So our next meeting again is on September 1st, and that's scheduled approximately from 10 to 4 p.m. on that day. And with that, does anybody have any questions? Oh, so sorry. Hi, Dawn.
Sorry, I couldn't find my hand. You mentioned alternative formats for the bar exam. Are any of the alternatives being considered ones that might rely in some part on the provisional licensing program and a shorter bar exam? Does the provisional licensing program factor at all in those discussions?
Yes, so the agenda is not up, but one of the things that we'll be looking at are those alternatives to examinations altogether. So provisional licensing will be explored, diploma privilege. There's going to be a presentation on diploma privilege, as well as the Daniel Webster apprenticeship programs. So that is forthcoming. So yes, that's also part of our discussion. Devin, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I noted that the report is due on in January of 2023, assuming the world complies with that. Can you talk about sort of what we anticipate the decision-making process after the report to be? Like, are we talking about then it will be multiple more years before a decision is ultimately made, or what is that process, and ultimately who is that report going to make some decisions?
Yeah. So ultimately, this the Supreme Court is going to make that determination on the exam format and scope, depending on all of the results of this report. And what I imagine is that there's going to be a transition period. If you look at the work of the testing task force, they have a 5-year plan in place. I'm not suggesting that we need the same thing, but depending on how vast these changes are, that we're probably going to need an implementation plan as well. So without knowing really what our changes are, it's hard for me to gauge how long we have, but an implementation plan will be part of that process. And much the same way that we did when we transitioned from a 3-day exam, from a 3-day exam to a 2-day bar exam, we needed to provide the law school sufficient time for that transition period. I imagine that this change in the bar examination or its alternative will have that same notice to the law schools as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? All right, well, thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Amy, and we look forward to hearing more about this as it develops.
Mm-hmm.
We will move forward with our next agenda item, which looks like it was scheduled exactly right because I have 9:45 as according to my clock. The next agenda item is a report from the National LGBT Bar Campus Climate Survey. I will note that the agenda was noticed before the bar took note of the National LGBT Bar's new name, which is now the National LGBTQ+ Bar Association, which sort of personally I will acknowledge I appreciate sort of a broader inclusion of their mission. I believe Judy O'Kelly is supposed to be our speaker. Is she with us?
Yes, she is, and I'm in the process of bringing her into the room to speak.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Judy, welcome. If you unmute your mic, we'll be ready to hear you speak. But you may not yet be able to turn on your camera. Apologize for that.
Can you hear me?
Yes. You should be able to turn on your camera now too.
Okay, great. Looks like I'm up. Everyone can see me? I'm good?
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. Well, thank you first to all the members of the Law School Council, and especially to Mr. Kenyon and Ms. Leonard for inviting me. I appreciate this. As you heard, I'm Judy O'Kelly, the Chief Program Officer of the National LGBTQ+ Bar. We are also very delighted by that upgraded name, and thank you for the recognition of that. So I'm delighted to be able to give you just a few quick updates today about the National LGBTQ+ Bar Association and Foundation's work that impacts law students and law schools. And part of that is talking about the campus climate survey that you wanted to hear about. So first, I did want to make sure that everyone here knows about our law school affiliate program. So this is a program that is open to LGBTQ+ student groups at any US law school. We currently have about 100 student affiliate groups at the moment. I don't think that I can add to a chat here, but you can see that under on our website. If you go to either lgbtqbar.org or lgbtbar.org or lgbtqbar.org. We've just launched the new one about an hour ago, so should be able to go either way. If you click on the programs tab and then come down to law students, you'll be able to see that. We have a number of offerings for students, but the affiliate program is really great. Student programs that are affiliated with us receive a number of benefits from us. We host a Google listserv for student leaders so they can share thoughts and actions and support one another. We share a resource and an action guide that we wrote that provides ideas and support for student activities and tries to really just support the health of their organization year round. We also send a monthly email to all those groups with suggested actions of the month. And we send job and internship and fellowship announcements that come our way. In addition, the normal student membership to the LGBT bar is $40 annually, but for members of student affiliate groups, we give a 50% off of those annual dues. So only $20 for a student to join the LGBTQ bar and to be able to have all the benefits that we offer year round. And so some of those other things we do year round, I think you all probably likely know about our annual Lavender Law Conference and Career Fair. That hosts about 180 to 200 recruiters every year who are seeking to hire LGBTQ+ law students into summer jobs, and also many of them leading into permanent jobs. And that, by the way, I should note, for law students who are members of ours, that is entirely free to come to. We don't have the ability to help with the travel expenses or the housing expenses when they're there, and we often look to law school career services offices to help students with that. But we do make it free to students if they're a member of ours to come. And last year, we also launched a scholarship program for law students from the bar. We now grant 3 $2,500 scholarships to law students who are committed to advancing LGBTQ equality. We do one to an incoming 1L and one each to a rising 2L or 3/4L. We're also going to be administering a new additional scholarship on behalf of the International Association of LGBTQ Judges. That will also be a $2,500 scholarship going to an LGBTQ+ law student. So the main reason that I'm here to talk to you today is to let you know about an exciting expansion to our annual law school campus climate survey, which is going into its 4th year this fall. I believe that all the members represented here today on this call are with schools that have been participating in that survey, and I really thank all of you for that. It's not a small thing. I wouldn't say it's an ordinarily or an extraordinarily heavy lift, but it is a lift to fill that out, and we're really grateful for everyone who participates. So we've been surveying all ABA accredited law schools about a range of topics that impact their LGBTQ+ constituencies, that's students, administrators, and faculty. We asked questions about self-ID programs, faculty benefits, curriculum questions about the building facilities, and other sort of benefits that might be out and available on campus. So we send this survey as well as a best practices guide that is intended to support law school administrators in enacting some of these potential reforms if they're new to them. We send that out to all law school deans as well as other contacts that we may have within the school. Every year, right around November 1, we request responses by February 28th. So there's a good 4-month period to be able to do it. We know the holiday time is tough, but we want to give plenty of time. And then we publish the results around April 1 each year. This year, we saw 112 law schools participating in that, which was really wonderful. And we've so appreciated how those numbers have gone way up in these last 2 years, even with COVID and with so many schools being remote. So I'm delighted to announce here that this year we're going to be expanding this survey by sending it also to the deans of all California law schools. That includes all California accredited and non-accredited schools. And we're doing that in anticipation of the California Bar beginning to collect demographic data, including that on LGBTQ status. And we're just so happy to be able to support the wonderful work that so many of you are doing to advance LGBTQ equality on your campuses and across California. So you can see, if you're interested, you can see our annual survey and the best practices guide that we provide. It's on our website, again, lgbtqbar.org. Click on the programs tab and select the law schools option. That's different from the student option. We send that final data every year to all law school deans. We give the deans who, we give the people who submit the survey to us about a week to review their own data before we publish, just so we can make sure they're happy with what's been put up there and that there haven't been any changes. We then publish it on our website. We send out a press release at the time of publication. We also share it with all LGBTQ plus resource centers at undergraduate institutions across the country, just so their students can be informed about the information that they may need as they consider whether or not to go to law school. And the data that's included in that report is exactly what schools self-report. We do not rank, we just simply report the responses. That includes a large amount of opportunity for schools to provide textual answers, not just numbers in most cases. We really want to give schools an opportunity to shine and to provide nuance. We know not every school is similarly situated. And so, we're trying to give a lot of opportunity for schools to just talk about what they get to do. And our real goal in conducting this is to raise up all that wonderful work that we see happening in so many campuses to advance LGBTQ inclusion. So love for you all to take a look at that. We're, again, very excited to be including all of your California schools, and I'd be happy to take any questions if you have any.
Why don't we go with Natalie first, since I'm the chair, and I'll bow to her. How about that?
Oh, yeah. So Judy, will the Lavender Law Conference Public Health Conditions Willing be held in California next year? And does that present any particular opportunity for law schools and their students in this upcoming year?
Such a good question. Yes, again, public health conditions allowing, we will be in Los Angeles. We'll be at the Lowe's West Hollywood next year. We were supposed to be there this year, and the hotel worked out a deal with us to move that by a year, and we rearranged our other contracts so that we could come back to California, because we really want to be there every few years as we rotate around the country. And so, I think what we're really hoping, we actually saw an unprecedented number of students being able to participate in the Lavender Law Conference the last 2 years as we were virtual. The registration numbers spiked astronomically, and we actually did provide comped memberships over the last 2 years for a period to all law students to try to help them out in that time. So the numbers for registration were very high, the numbers for attendance were high, but usually we're seeing anywhere between 300 to 400 law students coming in person anyway. So I think what might have happened more this time is a little bit more targeting of the opportunities that they wanted to do. Instead of walking around a giant hall, they were clicking on the booths of the recruiters they wanted to talk to. I think the biggest challenge that I see for students is getting that funding and the permission to be able to come. We know that so many of you, particularly at state schools, are still restricted in what the state's allowing in terms of funding for any of you to attend conferences, which then extends out to the ability to support students to be able to go to these kind of opportunities. So we're keeping an eye on that and wanting to make sure that students are really well supported and able to come. What's hard for us is that it's difficult to put on both, sort of a hybrid, right? We kind of need to be either in person or virtual, because not only are we doing the career fair, but we're also doing a monumental program with a lot of speakers who need to be one or the other.
And can schools reach out to you if they want to talk about opportunities to speak or to be part of the career fair or otherwise participate?
Absolutely, I would love that. Yes, I'm judi@lgbtqbar.org. It's my email. If you write JUDY, it will also come to me, because that happens a lot. Yes, I would love for people to reach out about anything. You could reach out to me about the climate survey, reaching out about Lavender Law and how we can help support your students would be really wonderful. We know that students are extremely stressed right now about job options, and we want to be there to help. And I should add, we've been doing webinars over the last 2 years as well, on all kinds of career-oriented things, as well as mental health, as well as sort of how to survive law school, right? How to get through, particularly for 1Ls. We have a number of webinars on that student page on our website if folks want to share those.
Thank you. And thank you, Devin, for the opportunity to ask those questions.
No problem at all, because they were on my list. So I'm glad that you hit them. I have one recommendation and then one question. The first recommendation is I love that you all are sort of building kind of the network of the student orgs. And I would encourage you, if you don't already do so, I have not looked, is to make sure that there's also a way to track their faculty advisor or sort of their primary campus contact, because those, like I'm in that role for my school and we are more sort of continuous than our student leaders are. And so it's a better way to ensure that the communication is consistent.
That's great. Thank you for that. And that's a good idea. We have not been consistently doing that. And I will add that the one thing we have asked for you to know is that every group provide or create an email address for their group, rather than giving us the student leaders group email address, because of exactly that problem. So if you all have the power to encourage your law schools to allow them to have those emails, that helps. But I will add that, and thank you for that.
Awesome. And then my question is really about the survey, because I've seen the results. I love it every year when it comes out. It gets shared widely at my law school. And one of the things mostly comes from having been sort of a gay law student myself, which is it sounds like you're much more like, let's just sort of present these results. But is there any sort of secondary work to be done to actually evaluate if students agree with how their law schools portray them? I feel pretty comfortable with what my school does, but I don't know that, hopefully my students would say the same thing about us, but I don't know if that's always the case. And I think that that's probably true sort of widely across the country.
Yeah, no, it's such a good question. And I'll be honest with you that it's one I've really struggled with around this, because I kind of don't want it to end up being Yelp, right? I mean, I think it's important that not every sort of random student complaint that an administrator doesn't have an ability to respond to is just amplified in a really public format like that. I have been thinking about the possibility of having the student groups themselves have an opportunity to say something and have that, have a statement kind of appended on. Honestly, part of this has been about building over these last 3 years, building the sense of understanding of who we are for a lot of these schools that have been on a bit of an upward trajectory in this work, and trying to kind of build some credibility of our relationship with them. And so I've really wanted to be careful and cautious and approach this in a way that would be encouraging them to participate and not feeling that there's a deterrent. But I agree with you that I think we're gaining critical mass. We're at over 50% of schools participating, and I think we're at a point where we need to be at least inviting that sort of input from students. And so that's likely to be something that, if not this year, next year gets appended. I kind of want to see perhaps what students have to say about it. I will note that sometimes schools have misunderstood the nature of the survey when we send it, and have sent it to their student group to fill out, which is not appropriate. It's very much administrator-driven data that's on there. And sometimes it seems as though those links have gone really broadly to people who have answered in a lot of, and I don't think these were LGBTQ people, responding in like really inappropriate ways, to it. And what I do when I see those results is to call the school and to ask, do they have a different submission that they'd like to put in? Because it does have to come from the school, and we need the job title of somebody from the school who's submitting that. So that's why I remain kind of careful about it. I think it's important to do it. And I also think it's important to make sure that there's integrity in the opinion of that, and probably doing it through the law school group is the way to go.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions for Ms. O'Kelly? Okay, seeing none, I will sort of thank you on behalf of all of us for joining us. And we look forward to sharing information with our schools and sort of learning more about what you're doing in the future.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
No problem. Our next agenda item is a report from the Office of Inclusion at the State Bar about their current initiatives. And I believe we're going to be joined by Elizabeth Holm, who looks, I see her name just appeared on my screen, so I imagine she's zooming in right now.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Kenyon, and council members for the opportunity to provide an update to you. My name is Elizabeth Holm. I am a program manager with the Office of Access and Inclusion. And for those of you who don't know, the Office of Access and Inclusion advances the board's diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic objectives, as well as the access to justice objectives in the strategic plan. So we have the pleasure of working with a lot of our colleagues across the State Bar, including the Office of Admissions, on various projects. And so I believe the last time staff from our office, as well as the sub-entity Council on Access and Fairness that we staff, presented to the council was in 2019, when we were first beginning our efforts to look at law student retention, particularly for diverse law students. And so I actually have a PowerPoint that I would like to share. So let me pull that up. And so I wanted to provide this update on our law school retention work, as well as another initiative that I thought you might be interested in. So we are studying law school retention, and in we surveyed all law schools in California, and then along with that data, we are looking at law school enrollment data as well as law school attrition data. And so thank you all for participating in the survey. It was quite a long survey that I know took a lot of effort and resources for you all to complete. And so we were really pleased that we had an 87% response rate, with ABA law schools at 83%, Cal accredited schools at 94, and unaccredited 82. So we really have a really robust data set. We have hundreds and hundreds of pages of really, really great data that we're hoping to review and then look at, along with the annual report data from the Cal accredited and accredited schools, as well as the ABA 509 data. And so for those of you, just a refresher, the survey topics were, we asked about student support, recruitment programs, financial support, faculty and staff cultural competency trainings, student participation in curriculum development, as well as institutional tracking of performance indicators. And as I mentioned, we'll be looking at the law school survey along with these data points here to see if there are any interesting findings that might be useful for law schools to look at in evaluating their own programs. And so, as I mentioned, we have a lot of data that we're sifting through currently. And so we're also working with our Council on Access and Fairness to look at the data and provide updates. We may be following up with law schools along the way, just to maybe clarify so that we really understand the information that you've provided to us. And then we're hoping this fall to finalize a report or resource guide that we hope will be very useful for law schools in California. And then the second initiative that I wanted to share with you is we are looking at LRAP and loan forgiveness. And so we have an informal working group made up of members from the California Access to Justice Commission, the State Bar's Council on Access and Fairness, and the State Bar's Legal Services Trust Fund Commission to study the viability of loan repayment assistance programs and or loan forgiveness programs. And we're really focusing on whether these can be mechanisms to help recruit and retain law students who then will eventually become attorneys in nonprofit and public sectors. We're kind of looking at it with two lenses, both the access to justice lens, hoping that your law grads will then become attorneys in these sectors that will provide access to justice in California, but also looking at the diversity of the law students and then our incoming attorneys. And so we've been conducting a lot of research and analysis. We're really looking at LROP programs, maybe statewide LROP programs, employer sponsored LROP programs, looking at the federal public service loan forgiveness program. I know there's been a lot of disappointment with this program. And so with the new administration, we're seeing if there is, possibly any traction with this program now. And so earlier this in June, we sent a survey to public interest attorneys to gather additional information about their student loan debt. In the past, you may recall we surveyed law students about debt load and kind of impact on career choice. And so this past June, we kind of wanted to gather information kind of from the other side of it, what attorneys kind of are facing and what their expectations are in terms of paying off their loans. And so we focused on government and public interest attorneys, civil legal aid in nonprofit fields. And we had a 22% response rate, which we're very pleased with. The respondents kind of tended towards more government attorneys, but that is in line with who our attorneys are in the profession. We have about 14% government attorneys and 4% nonprofit. And so we asked questions related to the types of loans they had now versus at graduation, and the amounts per category. We gathered information about interest rates, and then asked about their intention or hopes of having loans forgiven through public service loan forgiveness, and gathered information about whether they were currently or previously involved with LRAPs or income-based repayment plans. We also gathered demographic information so that we can see if there was any kind of disparate impact on attorneys of color or based on gender. So we're analyzing the data. We've, our early kind of findings from the data is not surprising. Younger attorneys tend to have greater debt loads than older attorneys. Kind of the participants who answer questions about the public service loan forgiveness, the vast majority were rejected. And so, we're kind of trying to sift through to see, what recommendations we might make to the Access Commission, Trust Fund Commission, COAF, and eventually our Board of Trustees on potential next steps. So we're in the middle of looking at the data and our research to see what might be viable solutions for LRAP and loan forgiveness. And then I also wanted to point out that we do have a few kind of pieces of outreach material for prospective law students that are available on our website. We have a brochure, Be a Lawyer, Make a Difference, as well as we're developing a couple of videos to encourage law students who may not think about the legal profession as a career option. And so we're trying to highlight kind of diverse lawyers as well as kind of diverse paths to law school and kind of non-traditional legal careers as well. So, if the opportunity arises, I do encourage you to check those out as well. And at this point, if anybody has any questions for me, I'm happy to take them.
Don Smythe, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're muted.
Yeah, I was saying that I think I was involved in the last discussion we had on this council about this matter. I probably forgot to unmute myself then too. One thing we emphasized during that last discussion was how the difficulty of the California bar exam has impacted underrepresented groups in the legal profession. It not only results sometimes in relatively high failure rates for members of underrepresented groups, but it can also result in schools adopting more severe academic policies that result in higher academic attrition rates that have a more severe impact on underrepresented groups as well. It strikes me that many students in underrepresented groups face a higher risk of completely falling through the cracks, perhaps not graduating from law school with significant law school debt, perhaps graduating from law school with significant debt, never passing the bar exam, or failing enough times to severely diminish their opportunities of having a legal career. Are you looking at that particular problem? Am I imagining this to be a bigger problem than it actually is? Because it doesn't sound like a public service interest debt repayment program is going to help those people.
Sure, yeah. So we are trying to look at that. That was one of the reasons for our law school survey, to look at what supports and programs are kind of available, and then kind of compare that to what enrollment rates are, attrition rates are, that we are gathering from the 509 data. So that's one way we're hoping to kind of get at that question, and to see how we can, maybe put forth some suggestions or recommendations on initiatives that could help, underrepresented law students, be successful in law school, graduate, pass the bar exam, and then become attorneys in the profession.
I want to thank Dawn for bringing that up, because it's something I think a lot about as well, coupled with just the costs that students bear related to bar exam preparation and bar admission. And I'm wondering if that is something, I think of, as someone who is paying loans, like I sort of process that as those are loans for my school costs. But now as someone who advises law students preparing for the bar, I'm much more thoughtful about things related to, how are you going to fund your moral character? How are you going to pay for your sort of bar prep course? And I'm not sure if we're capturing all of those costs, perhaps that you all are.
That's a really good point. And I think, that's something we will, take into consideration. I think, I think bringing up the cost of, bar prep, we in the brochure, the last slide that I showed, we do, encourage, potential bar takers, to invest in studying for the bar exam to be successful. One of the resources we have associated with the brochure is the Khan Academy's free bar prep course. And so we are aware of that, and want to be able to kind of uplift resources that can help, that hopefully won't cost law students more money than they've already invested.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions for Ms. Holm? Okay, seeing none, I will thank you for your presentation. We look forward to continuing to hear updates about the work that you all are doing.
Thank you so much.
I think our next agenda item is an update on the California Lawyers Association, sort of related to networking opportunities for law students, grads, and provisionally licensed lawyers. And I believe Natalie is going to give us that update.
Yes, thank you. So I will be the stand-in today for our representative from the California Lawyers Association. I apologize. They had an emergency that pulled them away, but we did still want to get this information to you. So I'm going to share my screen. And talk a little bit about that. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Terrific. Okay, so the California Lawyers Association is an entity separate from the bar that offers educational programs, various networking opportunities, and more. And we ask them to come and speak specifically around the area of opportunities for provisionally licensed lawyers or aspiring PLLs, but we ask them to talk about law student opportunities too. And not everyone knows about these free resources that are available for your students students and your graduates. So we wanted to share that today. The first news is that your current law students can join the California Lawyers Association for free. And in addition to joining as members, which gives them access to the networking and various other opportunities, they also can join up to 3 practice area sections, either in a specific area of law or the Young Lawyers section, so that they can begin their networking and begin to observe other attorneys while they are still in school. This would give them access not only to opportunities in their local area where they're attending school, but to reach out to attorneys statewide. Once your folks are eligible for the PLL program, just a reminder, while the expanded program with the Pathway to Licensure has closed for applications as of May 31st, graduates can still apply for the PLL program if they graduated within the time period, December 2019 to December 2020. And if they are looking for an attorney placement, they can join the CLA for free. Again, they can also join the 3 sections as well. And there is a special spot on the State Bar on the CLA website that has a forum for students that are graduates who are seeking a PLL placement. And their membership will continue to be free once they're approved for the program and they act as a PLL through the program, which continues to June 1st of next year. It also has a resource for supervising attorneys, free videos that they can see even if they are not CLA members. So if you have attorneys that are, for example, alumni of your law school, and they say, hey, you know, I may be interested in hosting, what would be involved, they can find out from the State Bar, but also CLA is a resource for those attorneys that are thinking of sponsoring someone from PLL. If members of the law schools would like to reach out to the CLA, Ellen apologizes that she couldn't be with us today, but she absolutely wanted me to share her contact information, Ellen Miller at the California Lawyers Organization, to make that available to you. I may not be able to answer as many questions as she would, but if there are any questions, I'll certainly try or also convey them back to CLA.
Any questions for Natalie? Channeling the people from the CLA. Okay, seeing none, we thank you for the presentation.
Okay, you're welcome.
The next agenda item is a report on the fall 2021, both Law School Assembly and Law School Registrars meetings that are scheduled for September 28th and September 29th, respectively, on Zoom. I've been asked by bar staff to just really encourage everyone from the law schools who has been involved and wants to be involved in the assembly and the registrars meeting to do so, because of, they are important forums for us to engage with the state bar, and particularly for those people in our buildings who help students on the front end to do their work. Natalie, you want to give us some more details about those meetings, please?
Sure, absolutely. So we really appreciate having the Law School Council as a place where we can have a public dialogue throughout the year. And the law school meetings are one chance to really engage every member of the law school community or representatives from every school in the conversation. We have 2 meetings, each with a different focus. The Law School Assembly is generally for the dean of the law school or other administrators, usually bar success, or dean of students. The registrars meeting covers programs of a more technical nature. And what we most want to share is that it's not only a place for us to share the initiatives that are going on or to help shape the priorities of what might come next, but it's also a place where we solve issues and collaborate together. So for example, in recent meetings, or things coming out of the recent meetings, include the Friday blasts that some of you in this group may get as the bar exam approaches, expanding the distribution of the law school dean's e-newsletter to other administrators, saving the dean the need to forward it and making sure that everyone who needs that information gets it right away. We've talked about specific language in the applicant portal based on the questions that you get from your students. And in fact, we actually made one change practically during the law school assembly that really reduced the number of questions that you got as administrators, that we get at the State Bar. And we hope that it helped make the process a little bit easier for students. But in order to make this type of program, we need your help. And that the help that we need is to understand what is most important to you and to really reach out for those granular questions. So next week, we'll be sending out an invitation to all of you, but also all of the deans and registrars at the law schools, talking about potential topics and asking you to suggest more and tell us about your key questions. And we really do want to hear what is top of mind for you, and hopefully solve any type of issues that we can. I'll show you a couple of possible things that we can talk about and that we could also talk about today if people have initial ideas. So I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, can everyone see?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so thinking about the Law School Assembly, that's the first meeting. It takes place on September 28th. It'll be via Zoom. We understand that everyone is interested in any developments related to the bar exam. So a recap of exams that have happened, the format now or in the future, what's expected for the future, all of those things are always incorporated. We also plan to bring to you an update from the study designers for the Bar Strategies and Stories program. That's a complimentary bar prep program that incidentally also was complimentary to law students that signed up. It was a 1-hour program that helped them to maintain a productive mindset while studying. It was conducted by outside researchers, so State Bar doesn't have access to that data except as it's presented, and we're looking forward to that update as well. We'll get some feedback, have a more interactive presentation from the Office of Access and Inclusion. Moral Character Department asked me to remind you that you can have a program not only through the Law School Assembly, but we can come to your school and we can talk to folks over, we can talk to your students over Zoom or also live in a public setting, and also have private time to address their questions. We can also talk about what's been going on with the PLL program from the administration point of view. But we'd like to know, what are your school's top questions or concerns, or what are your students' questions? And sometimes they're novel questions that haven't been presented before, but other times they are questions where we just need a reminder, or we've been informing students in one way and we need to inform them in another. But speaking of which, I understand you'd all like if we could text them, and we don't have the capability to do that just yet. So sometimes when things have to get out by text, we depend on you. So if you had to think about just off the top of your head, are there any 1 or 2 or 3 questions that you get from students, whether or not the answer is known or you think that they should know? Does anything come to mind? I'll start with Devin.
Yeah, I was primed to think of a question. So I actually came up with one in advance, which is, we often sort of are asked what the best way is for, mostly for our students, to sort of ask questions and sort of how long they should wait for a response from the bar. And so, for example, what are the best questions that they should call about? What are the best questions that they should be sort of putting into their sort of their bar portal, uploading that way, emailing, those kind of things, and how long is the typical wait time? A particular example came up this summer with people related to accommodations issues, and when they should be calling to follow up on that, and sort of when they should just sort of wait tight, knowing that bar staff was dealing with those issues.
Okay, so that's the sort of thing that we can talk about and put together a chart or a flow chart that would help people to know. And sometimes the answers are surprising. One of the most important things we needed to communicate this year was that when a student drafts an application, the step that it reaches just before we can see it and process it is the verified status. And so when a student or an applicant is ready, they must press submit. And so reminding students and applicants to press submit was super important.
I know that. I had a few students who asked about that, and I said, did you actually submit it? And they would say on the phone, oh, no, I didn't. And then that helped resolve some issues. So.
Oh, well, thank you. Chris, how about you?
Yeah, Devin raised a good point about accommodations. Ran into numerous accommodations issues this year, and it seemed to be on the rise. So just, I guess, transparency and a real feel for the timeline of when students should be submitting their applications or petitions. We were getting students, for example, submitting it before the deadline and not receiving their decisions until the week before the bar, and then being told it was too late to appeal. So if there was just better guidance on that and being realistic about timelines, that would be really helpful.
Okay. And one message that I would share also regarding that is that we've seen more applicants apply closer to the deadline than ever before. And we understand that for some students that could be because they are waiting to understand the full circumstances of the bar exam through this pandemic period. And just before this meeting, I spoke with the TA department to ask about that. And they encouraged me to remind everyone that students can apply even years in advance for their testing accommodations prior to the exam. And if something should change about the format or their disability, they will have the opportunity to amend. So the best thing that they can do is to go ahead and apply early. And then they will have the most opportunities going forward, but we can also fully clarify the timeline as well. But anything that you can do, I think that often students don't know that they can apply for TA even before they've decided for sure that they're going to register for the exam, and they don't have to pay for that. So that can be really helpful. Okay, thank you. And Nidia?
Hi, thank you for that information, Natalie. In terms of how early a student can apply, particularly for students who receive accommodations who have a long history of receiving them and perhaps the need for the accommodation is static, can they do that as early as their first year of law school, or is there a time limit on how early they can? You mentioned years, but I was wondering if there's a particular number.
For a static disability, the timeline is generally 5 years. So they can absolutely apply right from the beginning. And then that will give them some certainty of what they can expect going forward. And they might even choose to match the accommodations or to match the request to the law school so that they can practice with those conditions.
Thank you for that.
Don Smythe?
Yes, we have learned that the State Bar has recently developed new criteria for students rehabilitating their moral character applications. I don't know that this is a matter of broad concern at any law school. I hope it isn't. But typically when a student has done something stupid and has some moral character flaw in their record, it's a major issue for them. I do wonder if it would be helpful for registrars and associate deans and deans of students and deans to learn a little bit more about the rehabilitation of moral character application.
That's a great idea and a well-timed question. A moral character working group created some resources to talk about different scenarios in rehabilitation and the ways that they're generally handled inside. We have a resource page on the website that includes a chart, and just getting the word out there to all of the administrators and students is always a great idea. Thank you. And do we have any other hands? Okay, great. And I know that here we're talking about it just sort of generally, And I'll encourage you, but I'll also encourage members of our audience, and we'll be reaching out to all of the deans and registrars to submit these types of specific questions going forward. I'll just take a moment to go to the next page to talk about the registrars meeting. And there we tend to talk about, not surprisingly, very specific record-oriented questions, things like maybe doing an applicant, we call the applicant portal AIMS. I've used the AIMS name up there, but showing you what the students see. Sometimes we hear, students asking me a question, I'd like to know what they see. We could make that happen. And then there are some different topics, and you may or may not deal with eligibility in this area, but if you know, we could just do a show of hands. You could raise your hand if you think you might be interested in a certain topic. One could be a pre-legal analysis. So what criteria does a student need to have before starting an education, whether they've been educated in the US, or we are lately getting a lot of questions when folks have received their education outside of the US. And I find that as we're moving to an online education, we get those questions more. Is this something that we think about? Yeah, some. Okay. Then start over forms, what they are, how to use them, when to use them for students who want to disclaim prior law study and begin again. Not everyone knows about that process, and we sometimes get questions. Okay, not as much. Some. Okay, then we have LLM students and foreign educated attorneys. So those that have their first foreign degree in law from outside the US and wanting to establish bar eligibility here. That's usually, I see a lot of interest in that, particularly for schools that have graduate programs. Practical training of law students, we have a new contact there, and we have some tips for applying in a pandemic world for the practical training. I see some interest in that. We will probably do a review of the new accredited law school rules, noticed at a time for those schools most interested to attend. Testing accommodations, tips for applying, and best practices for students. And then if you have other records related questions, we'll take general questions that don't involve names in that meeting, and then we'll talk about how specific questions can be handled offline. So when we ask for your suggestions, we won't ask you to parse it between whether you think it belongs with the law school assembly or the registrars meeting, but just to give you an idea of how those meetings might be a little bit different. And we hope that every law school in California will be able to send a representative to the meeting, and that the Zoom format will make that easier. We did that for the first time in December, and we weren't sure how it would be. And while people expressed that they missed being together, they really liked the convenience of the Zoom format, and we have more participation from more schools than we've ever had in these meetings. And I think that's why we were able to implement so many changes right away. So we really value your partnership that we get through these meetings, and look forward to your questions. Okay, yeah, so that's what I had to share, and I appreciate the opportunity to do so, but even more than that, I appreciate the thought that each of you put into the questions before this meeting, and the questions that we'll need to make these meetings as useful as possible for you in September. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Natalie. I think the next agenda item we have is recent developments, and I'm supposed to ask the bar staff if there's anything that has emerged in the last 10 days that we should be addressing at the council meeting today.
I don't have any recent developments, but I will check with Amy and Audrey to see if they have any to add.
I do not.
Well, the CBE meeting is set for this Friday, and there are other developments to be covered there. Just to remind everyone, they can tune in.
Great, thank you. We will all look forward to that meeting with bated breath. Okay, I believe that is the conclusion of our agenda. And so I believe we don't actually have to sort of vote on adjourning. So I'm going to just call us adjourned at this time. Just remind everyone that the recording is still going until they officially notify us that it is off. So thank you all for making time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.